What if the greatest wealth someone could possess were not gold, but wisdom that comes from God Himself? The story of King Solomon is one of the most impactful in the entire Bible when we talk about decisions, purpose, and spiritual consequences. Son of King David, he did not inherit only a throne, he inherited the responsibility of leading an entire nation under the eyes of God. And at the very beginning of his reign, he made a request that would change everything. He asked for wisdom to discern between good and evil. This request pleased the Lord and opened the doors to a life marked by knowledge, prosperity, and unprecedented influence. But his journey also reveals a powerful warning. Receiving wisdom is not the same as preserving it. Solomon lived in honor, wealth, fame, and power, yet his own choices led him into moments of spiritual decline. Among all of Solomon's teachings, which one touched your heart the most today? Leave it here in the comments. Your participation may be a blessing and guidance to others. And as we listen to these lessons, may the Lord also pour wisdom over your life, guiding your paths and sustaining your decisions. Stay with me until the end of this message and discover 15 lessons filled with wisdom for your days. Let's begin. First lesson: ask for wisdom, and God will add what is necessary. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this, thy so great a people? And the speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, Because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast asked riches for thyself, nor hast asked the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding, to discern judgment. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. And I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. 1 Kings 3:9-13. Solomon teaches us that the priority of the heart reveals spiritual maturity. Instead of riches, power, or long life, he asked for wisdom to better serve God's people. This request deeply pleased the Lord because it was aligned with a purpose greater than personal interests. God not only granted extraordinary discernment, but also added riches and honor that he had not requested. The lesson is clear: when we seek first what glorifies God and blesses others, the Lord also supplies our other needs. Wisdom protects decisions, directs paths, and prevents losses that money cannot repair. Asking for wisdom is recognizing dependence on God. Today, this lesson invites us to realign our prayers, placing purpose, service, and reverence for the Lord above material desires, trusting that He knows exactly what to add at the right time. Second lesson: wisdom attracts recognition. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. 1 Kings 3:28. This verse describes the national reaction after the judgment between the two mothers. The expression, all Israel heard, shows that Solomon's decision spread quickly, becoming known throughout the kingdom. This indicates that acts of justice produce collective impact. The phrase, they feared the king, does not point to oppressive fear, but to reverent respect for authority legitimized by God. The reason for this reverence is revealed next. They saw that the wisdom of God was in him. In other words, the people discerned that his decision was not merely human, but divinely guided. Finally, the text highlights the purpose of this wisdom: to do judgment. This shows that recognition did not come from speeches, but from righteous actions. When God's wisdom is manifested in practical decisions, it generates trust, honor, and stability among the people. Third lesson: when the heart drifts away, the fall begins. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. 1 Kings 11:1-4. Solomon's downfall did not happen suddenly, but began with small concessions that over time produced great deviations. His fame, wisdom, and prosperity were not enough to guard his heart when he allowed influences contrary to God's will. What began as seemingly political alliances and relationships became an open door to idolatry. This lesson warns us that people rarely drift away from God all at once. The distance is gradual, silent, and progressive. Small permissions today can generate great consequences tomorrow. Faithfulness is preserved in daily choices, in spiritual boundaries, and in the constant vigilance of the heart. Outward success must never replace inward devotion. When we protect our communion with God, we also preserve our destiny. Remaining faithful in the details is what sustains a lifetime of honor before the Lord. Fourth lesson: there is a time for everything. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Ecclesiastes 3:1. Solomon teaches us that life is governed by seasons established by God. Not everything happens at the moment we desire, because every purpose has a specific time to be born, to grow, and to be fulfilled. When we fail to discern these cycles, we fall into frustration, anxiety, and premature attempts to rush processes that have not yet matured. This verse reveals that God works within perfect timelines, even when we do not understand them. There is a time to plant, to wait, and to harvest, and confusing these phases creates unnecessary weariness. Wisdom lies in aligning the heart with God's timing, trusting that He makes everything appropriate in its proper moment. Discerning seasons protects decisions, preserves peace, and prevents forced doors. When we understand that every phase has a purpose, we learn to rest, to act when necessary, and to wait in faith until the Lord's plan is fully revealed. Fifth lesson: excessive ambition enslaves. Again, I considered all travail and every right work, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. Ecclesiastes 4:4. Solomon observes that much of human effort is not born from noble purpose, but from comparison and envy. The text reveals that many achievements are driven by the desire to surpass others rather than to fulfill a true calling. When ambition is fueled by constant competition, it ceases to be healthy and becomes emotional bondage. A person works without rest, yet never finds satisfaction, because there will always be someone with more. That is why the wise man calls it vanity and vexation of spirit, a cycle that consumes energy without producing peace. This lesson invites us to examine our motivations. Are we building from purpose or from comparison? God calls us to work with contentment and gratitude, not envy. Balanced ambition builds, but when excessive, it imprisons the soul and steals the joy of what has already been achieved. Sixth lesson: wealth does not satisfy. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This is also vanity. Ecclesiastes 5:10. Solomon exposes the illusion that wealth can fill the emptiness of the human heart. The problem is not money itself, but the disordered love for it. Those who place their satisfaction in abundance enter an endless cycle of desire, because the more they possess, the more they feel they need. Wealth promises security and happiness, yet it cannot offer lasting inner peace. That is why the wise man calls this pursuit vanity, something that appears valuable but cannot sustain the soul. This lesson invites us to reassess our priorities. Resources are useful, but they are not sufficient to give meaning to life. True satisfaction is born from a heart aligned with God. When money takes the place of purpose, it becomes a demanding master. But when it is under God's direction, it becomes a tool for provision, generosity, and balance. Seventh lesson: pride precedes ruin. Pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. Solomon presents a spiritual principle that repeats itself throughout human history. Pride paves the way for downfall. Arrogance blinds understanding, causes a person to trust excessively in themselves, and leads them to disregard counsel, boundaries, and even God's direction. When the heart exalts itself, it distances itself from the humility necessary to remain steadfast. Therefore, ruin does not arrive suddenly. It is preceded by attitudes, thoughts, and decisions marked by pride. This lesson functions as a preventive warning. The higher someone lifts themselves, the greater the risk of falling. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Keeping the heart teachable, dependent, and watchful is spiritual protection. True greatness is not found in elevating oneself, but in remaining humble before God and others, thereby preserving lasting stability and honor. Eighth lesson: guard your heart. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Proverbs 4:23. Solomon teaches that the heart is the center of life's decisions, emotions, and directions. Guarding it means watching over the thoughts, feelings, intentions, and influences we allow to enter. Everything we do, words, choices, reactions, is first born within. Therefore, when the heart is contaminated by bitterness, envy, impurity, or unbelief, life begins to reflect that internal condition. The issues of life represent the streams that feed our attitudes and paths. If the source is clean, life flows with peace and wisdom. If it is corrupted, it produces confusion and downfall. This lesson calls us to daily spiritual vigilance, filtering what we hear, see, and cultivate within us. God desires a protected, sensitive heart aligned with His will, for from it flows the direction that shapes the entire destiny of life. Ninth lesson: trust in God, not in yourself. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths. Proverbs 3:5-6. Solomon teaches that full trust must be placed in the Lord, not in limited human understanding. To trust with all your heart implies total surrender, decisions, plans, and uncertainties placed in God's hands. Lean not unto thine own understanding is a warning against self-sufficiency, which often leads to hasty choices. The verse continues by revealing the key to divine direction, acknowledging God in all our ways, not only in difficult moments. This means seeking His will in both small and great decisions. The promise is clear. He will direct our paths, aligning our trajectories, correcting our course, and opening the right doors. This lesson invites us to rest in God's sovereignty. When we trust more in heaven's guidance than in earthly logic, we walk securely, even without understanding every detail of the journey. 10th lesson: the tongue can heal or wound. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Proverbs 18:21. This verse reveals that words are not merely sounds. They are seeds. Every phrase spoken carries the potential to generate life or produce emotional and spiritual death. Conversations marked by constant criticism, judgment, and harshness create heavy environments and fragile relationships. On the other hand, words of encouragement, forgiveness, and truth spoken in love strengthen people and build trust. The text also shows that those who use the tongue often will eventually reap its results, for the fruit of words always returns. This lesson invites us to inner vigilance. Controlling the tongue begins with controlling the heart. When emotions are surrendered before God, speech becomes more balanced. Using the tongue wisely is an exercise in self-control and a reflection of spiritual maturity, transforming daily communication into a source of life for everyone around us. 11th lesson: friends influence destinies. He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. Proverbs 13:20. Companionships exert direct influence over thoughts, choices, and paths. This verse shows that constant association shapes attitudes and mindset. Walking with the wise does not mean only physical proximity, but continuous exposure to prudent counsel, balanced examples, and solid values. Over time, this fellowship produces growth, maturity, and discernment. In contrast, the company of fools leads to destruction because it normalizes imprudence, hasty decisions, and distance from principles. Destinies are also built by the environments we frequent. This lesson invites us to evaluate relationships with wisdom, choosing connections that promote spiritual and emotional growth. God uses people to build, advise, and strengthen journeys. Surrounding yourself with those who fear the Lord and value truth is protection for the future, for the right friendships do not merely accompany, they help direct entire paths. 12th lesson: planning is prudent. The thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness, but of everyone that is hasty only to want. Proverbs 21:5. This verse highlights the contrast between diligence and haste. Planning involves reflection, organizing steps, and acting with consistency, while haste ignores processes and seeks immediate results. The diligence mentioned in the text is not merely effort, but effort guided by wisdom and discipline. Those who plan build solid foundations, avoid waste, and reap lasting fruit. Haste, on the other hand, often produces poorly calculated decisions, financial losses, frustrations, and rework. Lack, therefore, does not arise only from scarcity of resources, but from the absence of prudence in how they are used. This lesson teaches that God honors responsible planning, for it demonstrates maturity and good stewardship of what has been entrusted. Acting at the right time with strategy and patience produces sustainable abundance. Prudence protects the future and transforms present efforts into stable provision along the journey. 13th lesson: effort brings reward. In all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. Proverbs 14:23. Consistent results are born from practice, not merely from intention. This verse shows that every kind of work, even simple work, produces some form of gain, learning, experience, provision, or growth. Excessive talk without action, however, reveals productive illusion, where a person feels they are progressing but, in reality, remains stagnant. Dreams do not materialize through declarations alone, but through discipline applied daily. The poverty mentioned is not limited to money, but includes stagnation, missed opportunities, and lack of progress. This lesson reinforces that acting, even slowly, is more productive than planning indefinitely. God blesses hands that work, not only mouths that promise. Continuous effort builds solid paths and transforms projects into real achievements over time. 14th lesson: listening is a sign of wisdom. He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. Proverbs 18:13. The way someone listens reveals their level of maturity. Responding before hearing shows anxiety to position oneself, not a genuine interest in understanding. The verse teaches that this attitude is foolish because it ignores essential information that could completely change the response. Many conflicts, wrong decisions, and broken relationships happen precisely because of a lack of true listening. Listening is an act of honor. It honors the other person's words and the pursuit of truth. When someone is willing to listen fully, they respond with greater balance, fairness, and sensitivity. The shame mentioned in the text arises when haste exposes a lack of discernment. This lesson reminds us that wisdom is not found in speaking much, but in knowing when to speak. Attentive listening builds bridges, prevents conflicts, and turns communication into an instrument of peace and understanding. 15th lesson: the ultimate purpose of life. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Ecclesiastes 12:13. After examining riches, pleasures, achievements, and human wisdom, the conclusion presented points to what truly gives meaning to existence. The fear of God does not represent terror, but reverence, the recognition of his sovereignty and submission to his will. Keeping his commandments reveals a practical life aligned with this inward reverence. The verse shows that human purpose is not merely to achieve, accumulate, or experience, but to live in a way that honors the Creator. Everything else is temporary. Only the life lived before God carries eternal value. This lesson summarizes the essence of the human journey: to live with spiritual awareness, moral responsibility, and continual obedience. When the heart fears God, choices align, paths are adjusted, and existence gains clear, firm, and eternal direction before the Lord. We have reached the end of this journey of wisdom, looking at a profound truth. Knowledge can be acquired, but true wisdom comes from God. Solomon's story led us to reflect on choices, priorities, and directions that shape an entire life. We saw that asking for wisdom opens doors, but preserving it requires constant vigilance of the heart. We observed that wealth does not satisfy, that pride precedes the fall, and that the fear of the Lord remains the most secure foundation for any life. Each lesson presented is like a light shining along the path. Some warn us, others correct us, and many encourage us to remain steadfast. Biblical wisdom is not theoretical, it is practical, living, and applicable to the simplest decisions of everyday life. May these truths not remain only in the mind, but descend into the heart and become direction for your steps. May God grant you discernment in your choices, prudence in your decisions, and peace in every season of life. May the Lord strengthen your faith, calm your heart, and guide each of your paths with grace and wisdom. Remain under His presence, and you will always find light to move forward. Thank you for walking with us this far. May the Lord pour out blessings upon your life, guard your heart, and lead you in wisdom every day. See you in the next video. God bless you.